I'm Mark Halperin.
And I'm John Heilemann. And with all due respect to John Ellis Bush, TGIF, baby. TGIF. Happy National Pizza Party Day, sports fans. In our lineup tonight, a dinner and a show. First, the dinner. Tomorrow night in Des Moines, 11 Republican presidential candidates, or will-be candidates, are attending the Lincoln Dinner, which is part fundraiser and part open mic night. You can catch the whole thing on our live stream on BloombergPolitics.com, and I promise you it's going to be hilarious. In the meantime, Mark, a bunch of people at the dinner, 10 minutes each. Who you got?
My main focus is on Walker, Bush, and
you're not allowed to pick like nine. You're not allowed to pick like 9 people.
And Rick Perry. I'll just say, right now, if you look at the early states, the only state, not counting Lindsey Graham in South Carolina as a favorite son, the only state with somebody who right now is a clear favorite and who could change the contours of the nomination fight by winning is Walker in Iowa. I want to see if he uses that 10 minutes to solidify his hold on front-runner status.
Well, since you have taken all of the interesting people, it's hard for us to be in the disagreement zone because all those people are interesting. John Ellis Bush has had a horrible week. We're going to talk about that more on the show. We referenced it in the cold open. This is all eyes going to be on him, so that's important. Scott Walker is all the things you just said, and also someone who's been kind of off the radar screen. So this is kind of like his reappearance in a lot of ways on the campaign trail. Obviously, someone really interesting to look at. I continue to be fascinated by Marco Rubio, but he's not going to be there. So those two guys, I think, are the ones to look at, ones to watch. Pressure of different kinds on those two candidates.
I picked Rick Perry also, though, because he's now let it be known he's going to announce his candidacy in just a little few days. Yeah. And Iowa is vital to him. He's got to do well in Iowa, and he, I think, is going to come into this with a 10-minute attempt to remind the members of the committee, the Republican activists in the state, just how much he believes he's a good fit for the state.
Well, I'll say one other thing. I know, again, we're going to talk about Bush, but there's obviously questions around what Jeb Bush's strategy is in Iowa, and so that even makes the Iowa thing for Jeb Bush all the more important. One of the interesting questions will be not just. I don't think he's going to talk about Iraq. But this is an opportunity for him to actually turn the page. And we'll be able to now know the answer to the question we asked yesterday, which is, do they think they put a button on it and put it behind them?
One more person to look at, Bobby Jindal. He gave a great speech in Iowa the night of the White House Correspondents' Dinner, so most national media didn't see it at a cattle call, and a great speech at the event in South Carolina that I covered a few weekends ago, last weekend. He is on something of a roll, and he is an underrated factor in this race. See if he can do a great 10-minute speech.
I don't know that I think he's underrated. I think he's just about appropriately rated.
Underrated.
That's a
All
pretty good
riddle me this,
yeah.
viewers. Who is the presidential frontrunner in the Republican Party right now? The correct answer is no one. It's been generations since the GOP has lacked a clear establishment favorite atop the leaderboard this close to the Iowa caucuses, and the vacuum is making some Republicans very, very nervous. John, can you think of a scenario where there is a frontrunner for the party, a clear consensus frontrunner, before voters start to vote early next year?
I can. The Republican debates begin in August. Between August and the Iowa caucuses, now likely to be in the first week in February, there's at least 6 debates, maybe 7. Somebody comes out and hits the ball out of the park in debate after debate, backed with real fundraising and with poll strength. And again, there's a handful of people for whom that's plausible. Marco Rubio comes up and lights the world on fire in those debates and continues to rise in the polls. Marco Rubio could be the front runner. Jeb Bush could be the front runner. Now, I'm not saying those are the most plausible scenarios in the world, but that string of debates gives a lot of opportunities for someone to get on a roll.
Theoretically, I think you're right, but I just don't think it's possible now, because, or very likely at least, because every one of these guys who has a potential, I think, to break, you can't be the front runner unless you go up in the polls.
Right.
And I don't think anybody at this point has a chance to get much above 20% in national key state polls, except maybe Walker. And anyone who rises up is going to get scrutiny and I think brought back down. So part of why Republicans are nervous is no Republican now active in politics has ever been involved when you don't have a front runner, and it's just freaking them out.
I agree. Well, it's a totally unprecedented situation, and that's fascinating in and of itself. I realize now as we discuss this thing why Jeb Bush hates hypotheticals so much, because they really are kind of difficult to get. You're like, well, if this happened and that happened and this happened. Walker is someone, he could be in the lead in the polls in Iowa. He could be in the lead in the polls in New Hampshire. And again, combined with some good debate performances, Scott Walker could be the front runner.
Right, but here's
again,
the thing.
Yes, he'll get scrutiny. That could bring him back down.
On the other side, Bush, I don't think can be the front runner. His polls numbers aren't going to go up very much, and people are going to say, even if
that's a big concession on your part.
Even if his poll numbers go up, people are going to say when the voters vote, they won't. The dogs won't eat the dog food. They won't vote for a Bush. The problem, though, the reason he's a check against the other people is he's going to have $100 million in the bank, and he's going to be a Bush. And so anyone else who's perceived as a front runner is going to have to deal with the fact that when the voting starts, Bush is going to be spending a lot of money. His campaign, his operation is going to be spending a lot of money on negative ads. So I can't invent a scenario that I think is particularly plausible where Rubio, Walker, or Bush is actually a front runner.
Well, if you ask me to invent a scenario, I can and just did. If you ask me if it's the likeliest scenario, I think it's not. I think we are likely to not have a front runner until Iowa. And even if you think about back in 2012, where people now look back and say Mitt Romney was the front runner all along and he was always going to be the nominee, that's sort of true, but not really true. In fact, there were a bunch of front runners, and that was a super weak field. It wasn't until Romney won Iowa, which he only did for about 3 weeks, but he won Iowa. Then all of a sudden, Mitt Romney's now the front runner. I think if you didn't have a front runner in 2012, you're not going to have a front runner in 2016. Again, except if one of my weird scenarios comes true.
The other big dynamic is you can't really be a great front runner if you don't have a dominant hold on an early state. And there's nobody, with the possible exception of Walker in Iowa, who's going to have a hold on an early state.
I don't even think he's going to have a dominant hold on that state. He might be in the lead of the polls, but everybody will be conceivably within the margin of error, and so it may plays to your point. I think it's not going to happen.
Never happened before, and that makes talking about everything a little hard.
It's fascinating. All right, there are two truths in this world, people. Tom Brady is a filthy, rotten cheater, and the business community has never much liked President Obama. For the latest example of the second thing, first listen to what POTUS said about hedge fund managers this week during a speech about poverty at Georgetown.
The top 25 hedge fund managers made more than all the kindergarten teachers in the country. If we can't ask from society's lottery winners to just make that modest investment, then really this conversation is for show.
Lottery winners. Those are the nasty, naughty words in there, according to some people. And according to this guy, the chaser, he's the all-knowing #1 money man and Home Depot co-founder Ken Langone. He's also the raging id of the conservative business class. He was on this morning on Bloomberg TV. He was talking with Eric Schatzker and Stephanie Ruhle. Take a listen to this.
All he's doing right now with that demagoguery, all he's doing is saying rich people are taking advantage of you. The bigger problem I have with the president is he's engaging in something that cannot be good for America. He's engaging in the rich versus the poor, and that is wrong. That's destructive.
Okay, Mark, class warfare, class warfare, class warfare. That's what they all say about President Obama. That's what they've always said. But the question that I have for you, spinning this forward, is whether all of that ire on the business community and the financial sector's part towards President Obama, is that a problem for Hillary Clinton, or is that an opportunity for Hillary Clinton?
It's an opportunity if she takes it. Her husband was genius as a Democrat of winning over business people. She's going to Iowa on Monday. She's going to talk about small business. But she would serve herself well if she found a way to distance herself from President Obama, find some issue on which she could prove to business people better that they could trust her on the economy. President Obama is widely distrusted by people in the business community.
That's putting it mildly.
Putting it mildly. Wildly distrusted. They don't think you understand how markets work.
Right.
And her challenge, as she's catering to the left wing on almost every issue, is to simultaneously figure out how to sound like someone who understands markets.
But this goes back to our previous question, which is about scenario planning, right? I can imagine a way in which it's an opportunity, but on the current trajectory, it's more of a problem because she seems to be determined to take care of her left flank. And in that scenario, she says things like, according to this New York Times report a couple weeks ago, which said that she talked about toppling the 1%. Now, I'm not sure she actually said that. It was someone in the meeting who reported that she said that or something like it. But that caught the ear of a lot of rich people we know in New York City, people like Ken Langone, other people like that. And they hear her talking that way. They think she is like an ideological doppelganger for President Obama. It's going to be hard for her to fix that while protecting her left flank.
Part of why Bill Clinton fought so hard to win the business community over as a candidate candidate and as president because he thought it was good politics.
Right.
He also realized if he didn't do it, the fundraising would dry up.
Totally.
She is in danger of a fundraising problem.
I do not disagree, but the difference is, as with many things that are different with her and her husband, he was not trying to protect his left flank. He didn't see that as a political problem. His political problem was, how do I capture the center and leave the left flank behind? And in fact, in a lot of ways, he wanted to bash the left flank to prove he was a different kind of Democrat. She is not confronting that political challenge. Her political challenge is different, and so it makes this trickier.
Ken Langone is not alone. All right, congratulations to Jeb Bush. She just joined both Twitter and Instagram. And in other Florida presidential prospect spousal news, the Tampa Bay Times has just run a profile of Jeanette Rubio, Marco Rubio's wife, that includes a kind of mysterious section towards the end of the piece about her work for a foundation, including her salary. John, the Bush-Rubio rivalry is now pretty hot. My question to you is, whither their spouses?
Well, let's just, for anybody who hasn't read this story, I just wanted to share this part of the story from the Tampa Bay Times that you're referring to. It says that records show that Mrs. Rubio was paid at least $54,000 for her part-time job working with Norman Brayman. You remember Norman Brayman, the owner of the Philadelphia Eagles, the guy who the New York Times did that big story on the front page, says that Jeanette Rubio worked for him. And it says that she got paid a lot, and then it says the charity's IRS forms showed only gave out $250 that year, despite having assets exceeding $9 million. It doesn't really go into much detail, but it's a little small advancement. We both predicted there would be a lot more reporting on Norman Brayman. This is the first thing we've seen, and it's directed at her, and it raises some questions.
There's going to be scrutiny of the Rubios and their finances, and this is an indication that there will be more to come, as if we needed an indication. I think Mrs. Bush getting on social media is a huge development. Yes. Jeb Bush needs her now more than ever to make the context of his life, his personal narrative, a richer and fuller thing. We'll see how active she is in the account. We'll see if it leads to other things. But for her to now be on social media for the first time, to have a public-facing personality, is a big deal in this race.
Well, and right now, it's interesting. Rubio's fortunes are high. This is not an unusual thing in politics. Rubio's fortunes are high, and so now his finances and to some extent now his spouse are in the crosshairs, so they're going to have to now get ready to defend. In Bush's case, he's having a really hard go right now, and so now his wife being used in a tactical way. I'm not saying exactly manipulated, but she now is kind of going on offense. And you're right. She's a great mystery and a potentially huge asset. If she turns out to be an asset, she could be really important to him. And again, it's too early to tell, but it's interesting that she's out there. I agree with you.
I'm taking a look at an email we just got regarding Mrs. Rubio and the story. They're taking a little bit of issue with some of the facts in the story, but not sort of directly criticizing it. I will say again, both these candidates, as well as Scott Walker and some of the other people in the race, really have spouses who are much lower profile than we've seen in some front-running candidates in the past. It's going to be interesting to see how they step up in the coming weeks.
100%. All right, coming up, the worst week ever, at least for Jeb Bush. We'll be right back.
Been a bad week for Jeb Bush. How bad? Takes quite a bit to create cable TV news consensus, but Jeb's serial answers on the Iraq War did just that. Here is but a sampling of the Dump on Bush chorus.
Jeb Bush's terrible, horrible, no good, very bad week. Can he rebound?
This week was a learning curve situation for Jeb Bush.
His first answer was his gut answer, and from here he can't continue to vacillate.
He took, 5 attempts to clarify what his position was on an issue that's really important to the American people.
That it took so long for him to clean it up and get to where he is now. I think that's staff not reacting quickly enough.
Does not have the raw political instincts that his brother did.
There's been some concern expressed by Republicans in Iowa and New Hampshire and South Carolina.
I thought for months that Jeb Bush was not only the inevitable GOP nominee, but also the only Republican who could beat Hillary Clinton. This last stumbling week has made me reconsider that assumption.
It suggests a lack of competence. This is the one question he knew he was going to be asked in relation to his brother. Why on earth hadn't he got his answer sorted out?
All right. I'm not sure Governor Bush will be that focused on Geraldo's view on this, but
although his view is not a view unique to him.
No, I know.
That is a view being widely voiced by many.
I mean, that is a lot of voices saying pretty much the same thing, which is this is a big problem. I'm wondering what you think the biggest lesson is, we've talked about this all week, what is the biggest lesson about about Bush's candidacy and his prospects from this week?
Wow, there are a lot of lessons, but look, I think that I've gone back and forth, and we both have different, we both agree about a variety of different things. In the end, I think the most important thing is something Al Hunt said yesterday on our air, and he said it a few times. I still don't think he's in the right place. I still think he is in a place that has him in a wrong, in terms of the electorate, the broad electorate. His view now, which is, I would not, his professed view, which is, I would not have invaded Iraq if we didn't have evidence of WMDs, but I still think the war was worth it. I still think that with hindsight, we're right to go in, and the world is better off. Nobody doubts that the world's better off without Saddam Hussein in there, but that he seems to still be discounting the costs of the war in a way that I think is not where the mainstream of the country is, and a place where I think even the mainstream of the Republican Party is, in terms of the damaged American credibility around the world, lost lives, screwed up region, all the rest.
Here's what I think is a bigger problem. That's a big one, but here's what I think is bigger. People are being hyperbolic about this, but it is clear. Jeb Bush said, if I'm going to run joyfully. And he said, I'm going to show people my heart, and I'm going to be authentic. To me, the biggest problem with this week was he was not the least bit joyful. Yeah. He was not being authentic because he was trying to pick his words in some careful way. Yeah. And he wasn't showing people his heart. I still don't really know what his answer is to the question of what he thinks about the war. And if he can't be those three things, he's going to have a very tough time becoming president of the United States.
Well, yes, and look, there's the question of temperament and temper. And, we have both seen him be extraordinarily charming and extraordinarily good in a room. But yesterday, of all 4 of those days, yesterday, we talked about this on the show yesterday, but when he was up giving that answer, trying to clean it up, he looked testy, he looked aggrieved, he looked angry, he looked put out to be having to answer the questions that any presidential candidate has to answer, and especially this presidential candidate has to answer with relation to this issue and his brother.
And I've seen and you've seen George W. Bush, Barack Obama, and Bill Clinton, all three in a row, 2-termers, all be that way on the campaign trail.
Yes.
So that's why I think people are overreacting somewhat, saying that this is the death knell of his campaign. But
by the way, I'm not saying that.
No, I understand. It's going to be fascinating, though, to see if he learns from this, because anyone who's worked for Jeb Bush or covered him saw that video from yesterday, and they recognize that version of Jeb Bush. Now, that version of Jeb Bush got elected governor of Florida. That version of Jeb Bush, in the end, could look like the most presidential. One argument he made last night, he spoke to the RNC meeting pretty late at night after we were off the air. He's making an argument, which he'll make all year, which is basically saying, pick someone who can win a general election. Pick someone who's electable. Pick someone who's not caught up in the ideological intra-party drama. That argument, in the end, if he can be a little bit less like he was yesterday on the Iraq answer, I think that argument could carry him to the nomination.
It could carry him to the nomination, but I'll come back to my initial comment, which is that I do think in the end, and at some point he's going to sit down for print interviews. He's going to do a profile. Long profiles, as is the custom of every presidential candidate. He's going to sit down with a thoughtful writer. He's going to sit down with George Packer. He's going to sit down with one of our friends up here who has a book on the wall, like David Marinus, and he's going to have an interview. And someone's going to dig into what he actually thinks. We will find out eventually what he thinks. But on the basis of what we now know, if he is in a position, it's posture that I think he is in, on the basis of what he said yesterday and on the basis of the questions that he answered in the reporter scrum, I think it's a bad position to be in. I think it's untenable to be in a position where you are defending, in totality, defending the Iraq war as a good thing. That's a hard place to be in America right now.
And I go back to this question of the competence and the candidate skills. What's been interesting to me this week is listening to Republicans on the record, off the record, on background. They're not saying, man, he had a bad week.
No.
They're raising fundamental questions about, is he up to this?
This is the Geraldo point.
Yeah.
This is this.
Is he up to it? I didn't mean to denigrate Geraldo's point.
Yeah, no, I know, but you know what I'm saying.
But that is surprising to me, that he's got very little reservoir of people saying, well, bad week or tough issue. They're saying this tells you fundamental things about Jeb Bush's ability to win, and that is a bad place for him. He's lucky he's banked tens of millions of dollars already.
Yes, but I think that's also partly a result of the fact that this has been building for a while.
Right.
Because what the Republican establishment has been seeing so far in his campaign is lots of money, but not much support in Iowa, not much support in New Hampshire, and this deeper thing, which is you go around to those places and you don't find people who are really deeply, enthusiastically for him. There's no part of the party that's clamoring for Jeb Bush other than the donor class, and that's been building in a subterranean way, and this is now kind of like sparked an overreaction maybe, or an appropriate reaction, but it's kind of lit a fire around this.
So this weekend he's speaking at the Iowa dinner, but he's also doing some events in Iowa. It'll be fascinating to see if Jeb Bush takes press questions. If he does, whether they ask about Iraq, and if they ask about Iraq, how he handles it. Up next, a Mad Men exclusive. What John and I think about the upcoming series finale after this.
God knows America wants to know.
Describe a man to you with very specific qualities. He lives in Wisconsin, Michigan, Ohio. Some call it the Heartland. Some call it the Beer Belt. He has some college. Makes a good living. But it doesn't feel like it because he works long hours. He has a lawnmower. Wants a hammock. Bunch of power tools in the garage that he never uses. He loves sports because he used to play them. And he loves dogs because they don't talk. We all know this man because there are millions of him. And he drinks beer. Not just any beer. Oh, it has to be his brand. And what is his brand? The one he drank in college? The one his dad drank? The one that comes in the best bottle, can, tap? It doesn't matter because that's it, and it's not open for discussion.
That was a clip from the final part season of Mad Men, a crucial moment in the series where that speech basically sends Don Draper out the door and McCann Erickson never to return, at least so far. Mark, this is a series that you love. Me, not so much, but it's pretty good. What are you going to be doing on Sunday night, the finale? Will you be watching it? What are you going to be looking for?
Watching the finale. I mean, it's an incredibly well-crafted series. It's probably one of the best series probably one of the best 5 series of this golden age of television for sure. You know, John Hamm has never won an Emmy, and I think he might get at least a nomination for the previous episode, but I'm hoping he has a great final episode and win an Emmy off of that because he's one of the great characters in television history, and it's an injustice that he's never won.
Well, I disagree with you about all of that, but what do you hope happens to the character, Don Draper? I don't care about John Hamm. What do you want to see happen to Don Draper?
Oh, I couldn't care less.
Really?
I mean, I care, but I have no prediction or desire.
I got to say, the one character I really care about in this show is Peggy Olson. I think, the show, I think, is a little overrated. Doesn't anything anywhere close in the realm of The Wire or Breaking Bad or The Sopranos. But Peggy Olson really is, I think, a character for the ages. Really sympathetic, complicated, emblematic of women in that era. I want to know what happens to her.
You speak madness. One of the best shows in television history.
All right. It's not bad. It's not bad. We'll be right back with the King of the Blues. We will miss you, B.B. King, King of the Blues, and so will President Obama. Here's the president singing Sweet Home Chicago with B.B. at a concert at the White House.
See you Monday. We'll be live from Smitty's in Des Moines, Iowa. Until then, sayonara.
Sweet Home.